and all the Rabbanim here tonight. As a member of Avos Torah and his son-in-law to Harav Agoyim Pinchas Weberman, Zecher Tzadik Kodesh Levracha, I was asked if I can introduce the Masfidim and say a few words about my father-in-law. First, I would like to thank Reb Newhouse for volunteering the shul and for the foresight to know that Divrei Hespedim are exactly what our grieving community needs at this time. For the fortunate people in our community and in communities around the world that had a kesher or even a single conversation with Tati, as I was fortunate enough to call him, know that words alone are not enough in expressing who he was. Everyone who spoke to him was greeted with a hadras panim which was unequaled. A feeling of genuine avas Yisroel and a generational Talmud Chacham with nothing short of a Goyen intellect. For the last 60 years, he guided our community, just like he guided his shul and family, with endless self-devotion and wisdom. He moved to Miami Beach decades before it was an easy place to live as Torah observant, and helped establish the cornerstones of Yiddishkeit in Miami Beach, such as the mikvah and the Eruv. He opened his shul free of rent to many of those moistoids that are thriving in our city today. His considerable talents went well beyond our Jewish community. He was a treasured chaplain with the Miami Beach Police Department, amongst many others. The respect that the police department and City Hall had for him was awe-inspiring. Only in Shemayim can it truly be known every chesed, direct and indirect, that resulted because of the honor and respect that city officials had afforded him. In spite of all this, my father-in-law always had time for anyone in his family or a community member who needed him. Whether you were an anikel that needed help with homework, one of the many moistos needing direction, or someone that just needed a psak, an eitzah, a shoulder, a Shabbos board, a Shabbos recipe, mikvah shilas, eruv shilas, civic responsibilities, you name it. He always found time for everyone and everything. He was a true example of Talmidei Chachamim Marbem Shalom Lo'elam. Words cannot express our loss, and words cannot describe them. A book can easily be written about him. Because of him and someone like Harav Mordechai Shapiro, Zecher Kadosh Levracha, Miami now is a city that can exist as a kosher Torah city. As someone who was also raised in Miami and had firsthand edus of these giants, there is no one I can think of that can articulate our loss and put into context like Harav Ephraim Shapiro. It is an honor to call up Harav Ephraim Shapiro.
Rishus the Maradas or Shlita, all of the Rabbanim, Chashuvim, the family of Rabbi Weberman, Zechroinei Tzadik Levracha to Rabbi Yisroel, and I asked him Mechila in advance when I finish. I have to go back to North Miami Beach. I have the chus to give a Gemara shir, and I really feel that it's not proper to leave, but I did ask Mechila already in advance, and I ask it from the Olam as well that I have to leave when I finish. To the entire Choshev Kehila of Anoshim Chashuvim and Noshim Tzidkoniyos that came as the Shiva has concluded for Harav Pinchas Aaron Weberman Zechroinei Tzadik Levracha. There is a expression that, to be honest with you, and you might think that I'm just expressing my displeasure at this expression, but that's really not what my point is, and if you give me a moment you'll see. It's an expression that, to be honest with you, is tossed around a lot. Overused, and to be honest with you, on most occasions, used incorrectly. So I'm sorry if that's a strong way to begin, but if you bear with me, you'll see why it is the reason that every person who's gathered here tonight, and those who should be here, should have unparalleled hakaras hatov to Rabbi Weberman Zatzal. And the expression I'm referring to is, you'll often hear overstated and used incorrectly, oh, when they moved there, it was a midbar. When they moved there, it was mamish a desert, a midbar, and so turned it around. Most of the time, that statement is simply not true, and it's not accurate. People came after something was no longer truly a midbar, but it's an easy way to express that a person or an institution or a mice had made a big change. Now, it's wonderful, and Adarab, it's beautiful, but it's not totally accurate. Because more often than not, that city or that shtetl or that community was not truly a midbar, but it was something that was already established to a degree. In the case of the one that we came to be maspid now, Rabbi Weberman Zatzal, it's a real statement. So I'm actually happy to be able to use the expression and mean it, because it's actually true. When he, approximately 60 years ago, and a very, very small handful of others came, South Florida was pshutoy kimashmai, a midbar. So about Rabbi Weberman Zatzal making the statement is not hyperbole, but it's actually true. He, and perhaps a couple others, came when it was mamish, b'chol muvin demili, as his son-in-law just said so eloquently, a midbar. And what became of the midbar? Well, take a look around at the many, many thousands of families living in South Florida. And here's the thing about tonight's Hesped that has to be said clearly from the beginning. There are a lot of, sometimes you go to words of Hesped because you knew the person very, very well. And other times, you go to Divrei Hesped because it's the right thing to do. It's yashrus, because truth be told, fill in the blank. Although I didn't know the gadol, although I didn't know the tremendous gaon, but I do know one thing. What I'm the recipient of and what I'm the beneficiary of is because of him. So let's be clear and honest. A lot of the men and women who are here tonight are very familiar over all the decades. I myself am living here 50 years. And there are some people that have been here a little bit longer, about the same, a little bit less. So they would fall into the first category, that we came to be maspid Rabbi Weberman, Zechrein Tzadik Levrocha, because we, on the best as we could know such a goyin and gadol, knew him. But there are plenty that I'm looking around at that didn't know him, and thousands of families beyond the beautiful walls of this Beis Knesset that are able to enjoy the payros of all of that South Florida has to offer because of him. So you who are here, or those who should be here tonight, are here because of a deep sense of hakaras hatov. Because he truly came when it was taka a midbar, and then just got involved in everything. Many decades in his shul, involved in starting, and we'll talk about it in greater detail soon, our Beis Yaakov, kashrus, the mikvah, Bezdin, extraordinary number of maastos, as you heard a moment ago, being such a beautiful liaison with the police department, serving as their chaplain. And by the way, that in and of itself was always a myridik kiddush Hashem. They had extraordinary respect for the great man that Rabbi Weberman Zatzal was, and he was able to use that position to further beautiful things in Torah. Many times he was able to use that position als kavod hames, to get people out of autopsies. Many times he was able to use that position if, let's say, chachamim or rebbes or gedolim came to town and may have needed a police escort or some special favor of the police. Rabbi Weberman in that position was able to step in. So the expression midbar is true, and what's equally true is that even for those who weren't privileged to know him, how does one have a right to enjoy and appreciate so many of the conveniences of South Florida without realizing that to a large degree it's to his credit? So I guess for those, you should be here tonight. Al Tzakara Satayv. You see, the greatness of Rabbi Weberman Zatzal is found in a Pasuk in Navi. The Pasuk in Navi, which we say in the Yom HaRayim, is Lech Tech Acharai Bamidbar Be'eretz Lo Zarua. People are translating that to mean that it was a Midbar Eretz Lo Zarua, as if it's the same thing. But the Navi would not have to refer to the desolate land with two different expressions if it meant the same thing. So our Mefarshim tell us so beautifully that Midbar and Eretz Lo Zarua are two totally separate things. Some people come to a spiritual wasteland and they see it's a Midbar. And from a Midbar, nothing can grow. It's not humanly possible, b'derech hateva. But other people are such visionaries that they look at that desolate land and they don't see a midbar. What do they see instead? Eretz, a land that has the potential to be vivacious, except lo zarua. It has not yet been planted. It has not yet been worked with. But give it time. Allow a Rabbi Weberman to permeate a South Florida for 60 years, and then so you see, people don't accomplish the greatness that he did by coming to a South Florida of 60 plus years ago and saying, it's a midbar. Because nothing can adequately grow from a midbar. Great visionaries like Rabbi Weberman Zatzal look at this land and don't say it's a midbar, but rather say it's an eretz, a land, lo zarua. It has not yet been planted. It has not yet been worked with. But give me time. Let me work with kashrus. Let me work with the Eruv. Let me work with the mikvah. Let me work with the Beis Yaakov. Let me work as a chaplain or liaison with the police. Let me be in my shul for more than half a century. And then you'll see what becomes from an eretz that was lo zarua, and now, thanks to him, we're the beneficiaries of. It's about extraordinary hakaras hatov that it behooves us to have and to recognize so much of what he accomplished. My father, Zatzal, who you heard spoken about a few moments ago, one of his epic pshatim really touches up Rabbi Weberman Zatzal very beautifully. In not too long from now, we're going to be having the Daled Minim, and we know each one is a different type of Jew. One has taste and smell, one has neither, one has one, not the other. And what do we say about the lulav? Yesh by tam, ve'ein by reach. It has taste, but it does not have any aroma. My father Zatzal wondered, that's simply not true. The lulav, meaning the date palm, it doesn't have taste. The lulav is just a bunch of branches. What has taste is the dates, not the palm part of it. So how in the world, we say the medrash lulav has tam? No, it doesn't. So not having time to be ma'irich, because there are a few points I yet want to make before Rabbi Yisroel speaks, is based on a Meshech Chochmah. If you want to look up the Meshech Chochmah yourself, there are so many B'nai Torah here in the shul. The Meshech Chochmah is based on the words, why was it that only by Zvulun does the Torah say Zeved Toiv, Toiv is Torah? Yisachar was the son who learns, not Zvulun. So shouldn't she have said Zeved Toiv by Yisachar, not Zvulun? But my father's point is, in life, you have to thank and acknowledge the goyrim. Goyrim in English means the one who causes something to be. What would happen, my father Zatzal explained, if you had dates on top of those gorgeous trees outside the windows right here, But in the scorching sun, there were no lulavim to protect the dates. What would happen to the dates? They would shrivel up, they would become hardened, and they would be inedible. So the only reason that the dates could be eaten is because of the lulavim. And that, he says, is the pshat in the Medrash. I hope you're listening well. What has the taste is, of course, the dates. But if it wouldn't be for the protection of the palm tree, protecting the dates, they would shrivel up and be hard and inedible. So the only reason you could eat those luscious, delicious fruit is because of the lulav. Mamela Chazal say about the lulav, it has taste. It has taste. We ask the question, no it doesn't, but it's the goyrim, it's the cause. And something that causes something to be is the source of all the credit. That, Rabbi say, is what tonight's Hesped is all about. If after 60 plus years, we're able to enjoy the conveniences of yeshivas and Beis Yaakovs and the mikvah and the Erev and kashrus and batei din, and might I add humbly, walking around like proud b'nei Torah. One of the things that the old-timers who have been here as long as me, or even more, will tell you is, one of the greatest things that Rabbi Weberman Zatzal stood for was, of course everybody knew his easygoing manner, his infectious smile, always, always smiling. But when you saw him walk in his levush, you were watching the way in Emes ben Torah walks. This might be the most important thing that we need to remind ourselves. So today it's second nature. Today, Baruch Hashem in South Florida, thousands and thousands of people feel comfortable walking around that way. But when it was taka to others a midbar, but to him it was an eretz lo zerua, he always walked with courage, without embarrassment, with dignity, with pride, in the ganze levush, 60 plus years ago, walking. It's that courage that made him the forerunner of what you and I are able to enjoy today. So if my father Zatzal says about the lulav, yesh baitam, because it's the goyrim and it's the cause, the siba and the reason for the dates, then in a large part, all of that we're appreciating and enjoying in South Florida, Harav Pinchas Aaron Zechroinei Tzadik Levracha is the goyrim, is the cause and siba. And being here tonight at the Hesped is not only to be lezecher u'le'ila nishmosai, it behooves us mitzad hakoras hatoiv. Because so much of what we're able to enjoy in the way that he was as respected as he was, the role model of what it means to have such beautiful frumkeit, when it wasn't popular and it wasn't easy, he established. Let it not be forgotten that he was a go'in of extraordinary proportions. Sometimes we flippantly use the expression, someone who knows Shas Baal Peh. Rabbi Weberman Zatzal Takanu, Shas Baal Peh. Today when I spoke to one of his Einiklach, he told me a beautiful story 20 plus years ago when he was going to start giving a Daf HaYomi. Daf HaYomi at that time was holding in Seder Kodshim. I'm talking, of course, in Gemara. And the grandson told me today, he was young and he was nervous. I'm going to teach Zochim and Menachos and Chulin and Krisais and Kinim. So he did the most natural thing. Because by the way, Rabbi say, with all the myriad of things that I mentioned, Rabbi Weberman Zatzal stood for, top on that list was his wife and his large family. The dedication, respect, and appreciation for his wife and the love for his children was first and foremost in his mind. So as an Einakol called him, he said, sure, let's learn 10 o'clock at night. And he told me today on the phone as busy as Rabbi Weberman Zatzal was, 10 o'clock at night, every single night during Seder Kachim Gemor, you're talking about a cycle of approximately a couple of years, he taught him the daf so that the next day, the Einikel, who was a bit afraid, he told me today, honestly, he was afraid. And he was concerned, how am I going to give it over? Because his Zaidi, every night, the night before at 10 o'clock, fortified him with the daf in some of the most difficult Mesechtas and Shas Seder Kachim, something that he knew Baal Peh, and gave it over to his Einikel. Everything that he did, he saw through the prism of Torah. Today, an Einikel shared with me that at one point they were walking by a field, and he must have just second nature said to the Einikel, "What do you see?" So he answered, "Whatever you see, a field and trees." So he said on the spot, "You know what I see? Over there's a potential Isser of planting, an Isser of Zayreya. Over there's a potential mitzvah that you could do of Chayrish, of plowing. Over there, if you build that building in this way, there's a potential violation of Baina." And on he went with some of the Lamites Malachos. Because when he saw in Eretz, it wasn't yet Zorua, but everything was through the prism of Torah, through the lens of Zayreya and Chayrish and Baina. When I was speaking today to some of the people involved in the Beis Yaakov, and I was being reminded how those early years, to be exact, never once having taken a single penny for hosting them, 4 years in his shul, and then for an additional 9 years the use of his shul, and for those 13 years never once taking a penny. But perhaps the thing that I enjoyed the most was I had the chance today to speak to a woman who reminded me of a story that I had heard, but it speaks volumes. The woman reminded me how when her daughter was in Beis Yaakov, you have to understand Rabbi Weberman, Zechrein Tzadik Uvracha, for many years he taught halacha twice a week in the Beis Yaakov. And then afterwards, when he was no longer able to go up to the building in North Miami Beach, he went ahead and did with them a Shilas and Shuvas. I spoke today to a number of the Rabbeim and teachers in the Beis Yaakov, and they told me that the Shilas and Shuvas that he answered on the spot in Daled Chelkei Shulchan Aruch, and the questions that he got asked was from the most breathtaking knowledge imaginable. But you know what I enjoyed hearing? That when this mother reminded me her daughter went with carpool one day and pulled in, and when she got there, she noticed she had a flat tire. Maisa shahaya kachaya. So apparently they looked a little bit disappointed. And Rabbi Weberman came in to do a Shilas and Shuvas, and he saw this girl that I'm referencing, and he asked what was the matter, and she commented, "I have a flat tire, we're stuck." So I can appreciate the fact that we just spent the last number of minutes talking about a true Goin B'Torah who emes knew Shas Baal Peh, someone that I just told you about Seder Kachim, someone that I just told you how he viewed a field through the eyeglasses of Zayreya, Chayrish, Baina, and the Lamites Malachos. Somebody who the reason you should be here tonight is because he didn't view South Florida as a midbar, but rather an Eretz Lo Zarua. And he looked at the girls and said, "Don't worry." And on the spot, he took off his kapota, he took off his hat, your father did, he bent down, and on the spot, he fixed the tire. I appreciate that Maisa in light of what I've said the last 15 to 20 minutes. Because that easygoing nature, that infectious smile, that love that he had, that permeated the heart of every Yid, the respect that the police department gave him, all comes from the shleimus of the same person. It's the same person that has the ability to see a car of girls looking distressed and taking off his kapot and taking off his hat and saying, "Let me fix the tire," and on the spot fix the flat tire. And the mices are endless. And I'm sure you'll hear extraordinary things from Rabbi Yisroel and in the months to come. But the upshot is my father's Vart. For those of you who have been here as long as me, and for those of you who just know it as a name, all of the conveniences and all that we're able to appreciate with that term that's thrown around so inaccurately by Rabbi Weberman, it's true. And to him we owe a deep, deep debt of Akaras HaToiv. Because if we're able to walk around with a frumkeit and a lavush and feeling comfortable as B'nai Torah, if we're able to have all the conveniences we do, and I mentioned multiple times what he was involved in, it's thank you, as my father said, to Yesh Boi Tam. He gave South Florida that taste, and we're the beneficiaries. His life is probably best shotzed up with a Maisa with the Kapishnitzar Rebbe. The Kapishnitzar Rebbe used to bake matzahs before Yom Tov, and he wanted to thank all those that helped in the baking of the matzahs. So he had envelopes filled with cash, money, and he gave it to the different people that were involved in the baking of the matzah al Akaras HaToiv. Many have the custom to bake matzahs again on Erev Pesach. There's an Inyan. So the Kapishnitzar Rebbe wanted to bake matzahs on Erev Pesach. He went back to the same matzah facility to once again bake matzahs. And wanting to thank the people, he again had envelopes with cash and he handed it out. When he handed it to one of the Hasidim, it was one of the ones that he already given money to a few weeks prior, the first time he was there. So he looked at the Kapishnitzar Rebbe and said, Rebbe, you already gave me a few weeks ago. You were already Yaitzeh. And he looked at this Yid and he said, I want you to understand, I didn't come to this world just to be Yaitzeh. Many people come to this world just to be Yaitzeh. I did what I think I was supposed to. I was Yaitzeh, pretty decent checklist, and I'm good to go. The Kapishnitzar Rebbe explained to the Chassid, I didn't come to this world just to be Yaitzeh. Harav Pinchas our Weberman, Zechrein Tzadik Levracha, did not come to South Florida and to the world we were privileged to have him in just to be Yaitzeh. People who come just to be Yaitzeh do less than 1% of what he accomplished. But somebody who, full force, gets involved in shuls and yeshivas and Beis Yaakov and Batei Dinim and kashrus and mikvah and eruv and so much else to benefit every Yid, didn't come just to be Yaitzeh. He came to this South Florida to go lifnim Misheres Hadin, and we are the beneficiaries. Ezras Hashem, we should be zayta to continue making his neshama tahira proud by carrying on in his legacy and that which he lived for, to give off that presenlichkeit, that persona, that ibergegebenkeit of what it means to be a Torah Yid. And the Ezras Hashem, we should follow in the footsteps of this great giant. Yehi Zichrei Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi Shapiro. We'd like to call up Rabbi Yisroel Weberman.
This loss is a tremendous loss to our community. My father was a real gadol who was committed to the Miami Beach community since its early days. There is so much that can be learned from his life and can be taken as a chizik to continue to help our community and Klal Yisrael grow. My father's entire life was dedicated to the tzibur. He came to Miami when there was almost no Jewish infrastructure, and he committed himself to building it up. He completely remade the Eruv and he maintained it every week. He fully renovated the mikvah to improve its aesthetic and halachic standard. He involved himself in kashrus agencies, and along with being involved in Bati Dinim of Choshen Mishpat and Gittin. He was involved in starting the Chevra Kaddish organization and was instrumental in preventing many instances of nibble and mace through his political collections. He was close to many politicians, and he was a chaplain for the Miami Beach community, which he used to further the interests and needs of the community. My father ran a shul for many years, which he started himself in a once thriving community. He gave a famous Shabbos drasha every week, and he gave a shiur. He was a Baal Koreh, and he took care of whatever was needed, both large and small, in his shul. Even though he's a tremendous Talmud Chacham, he gave a simple Kitzur Shulchan Aruch shiur between Mincha and Ma'ariv because that was what his Kehillah needed. His approach to focusing on the tzibur was really expressed in his insistence on being able to convey messages in a simple, easy-to-understand way. He would rewrite his Divrei Torah many times until it was most understandable. He valued the koyach le'atera very much. He used to say, if you can make it aser, you have to know how to fix it. He knew Shas cold, and he could quote Chazal fully by heart. Additionally, he knew all the Torah clear, and Tanakh, Shulchan Aruch, Poskim, and Chassidus. He lived his life around Torah. He loved to share ideas of Torah, and even when he was sick, he was always speak and deliver Divrei Torah. When he was too weak to pick up a sefer, whether awake or oftentimes sleeping, he was quoting Gemaras and he was learning Parshas Baal Peh, and he always had Torah on his lips. One aspect of his approach was so unique was his positivity towards life. He was always optimistic, positive, and empowering. This really had an effect in enduring him to everyone and enabled them to grow. He was a tremendous medactic b'mitzvahs. He would go to the farms to watch the cows being milled to get home Yisroel. He had 2 separate kitchens in his house, one for milk and one for meat, to make sure that nothing happened. He would personally be involved in cooking food for Shabbos, for the mitzvah of Kibbutz Shabbos. And when it came to a minyan, he would go the extra mile. In his hospital, all he wanted was to have a minyan. He could be unable to walk, and he had no strength, but without a minyan, he would be devastated. He was always proud to be a Yid. He really didn't care what others thought. If he felt it was right, he would fight for it. He would walk around Miami Beach with his tzitzis out before there were many frum Jews around, and he always proudly presented himself as a frum Yid in every situation. My father really respected everyone. He had people in his shul from all walks of life, and he never judged on the externals. He had a relationship in some level with many Gedolim from all across the spectrum. The Satmar Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the Moshe, the Pinchas Yitzchak, and many, many others. He didn't place himself in a box of what sect he was in. He was part of Klal Yisrael, and to him that was all that was important. He showed respect to non-Jews as well, and he always had a good word for everyone he interacted with, and people really respected that. The reality is that the world and our community in specific lost a gadol. He has left a big void to be replaced, and there was a lot we must learn from him, from such a person, and a lot of responsibility to step up and care for the community like he did. We should be zocheh to be able to live up to the legacy of my father and to be zocheh to be as korech.